Hey everyone, so I am shooting this video for David Fuentes at DF Disc Golf, and Dave was asking me about the history of the throwing clinics, the travel around the country clinics that I started back in the 90s. And I thought it'd be fun to do a little video about a history of teaching in disc golf, and he's gonna shoot some footage from the clinic. We're gonna put it together, he's gonna put it together, and hopefully it'll be kind of fun. So first off, I do seminars and I do clinics. The seminars are the 6 or 7 person all day comprehensive classes. The clinics I'm speaking of are the more traditional, you show up, the local club promotes your event, a bunch of people come out and you teach a large group of people how to disc golf. That is what I started in the mid 90s. Now, before that, let's go back a little bit. I didn't invent teaching disc golf. That's not the claim I'm making. Plenty of people for years had taught before I did. I mean, in fact, the tradition in Frisbee forever was basically you taught the next generation. And that's the only way we really learned how to play. We learned from the masters that came before us. Even back in the 80s and 90s, there were certainly course pros who would teach you how to disc golf. People like Tom Monroe and others were even teaching college classes in Frisbee and flying disc. So I didn't invent teaching. What I did is I took it to a national level. Back in the 90s, the only thing close to national level teaching was an article that came out in Disc Golf World News once every 3 months. It would be, 4 paragraphs called How to Throw Farther. 4 paragraphs and a picture. And it was certainly better than nothing, but you can only do so much with an article. So I came up with the idea, what if I traveled around the country, contacted the local clubs, scheduled an event, and then stood up before the entire club and actually just taught everyone how to throw. For example, back in the 90s, go look at a video from the 90s, you're gonna see one player throwing sidearms. Me, right? It was called a trick shot back then, believe it or not, by many people. And it wasn't a trick shot, it's just that people didn't know how to throw it. Well, I came up with the idea of what if I travel around and I show everybody how it's done? And that's what I did. I ended up going to 220 cities before any other pro had even gone to one on the traveling clinics. I taught everyone how to throw sidearm, taught everybody how to throw farther. I got to spread how to play disc golf better, something I'm super proud of having created. When I look back at these clinics, I think they were okay. I mean, they were certainly better than nothing when they're the only thing out there. But they were basically live YouTube videos. And as most players know, watching a tutorial video on YouTube is better than nothing, but there's a gap between what you watch on the video and applying what you're doing. A live YouTube video, me in person, still left that gap. Where I learned to teach was doing private lessons. And in fact, earlier this year, I just did my 500th throwing clinic. And I don't really think I knew how to teach from the clinics. In the last 3 years, I've done 1,200 private lessons. That's where I learned. The reason why is all of these theories about how to do something, as soon as I told someone to do it, if they couldn't do the thing I told them to do, now we've got a challenge that has to be solved. I had to figure out how to get the player to do what I was telling him to do. This came from, logic and reasoning out solutions to begin with, but to a large extent, trial and error. Try this, doesn't work. Try this, doesn't work. Try that. It did work, awesome. Apply that to the next person. Sometimes the next person didn't learn the same way. I had to come up with a new method of teaching them how to do it, or one method that worked for everybody. And that's really what the clinics that I'm doing now have evolved to. All that feedback, and to be honest, all that the failing in teaching is where I learned to teach. That's where I developed, I call it the Scott Stokely disc golf method. maybe a little bit of an arrogant title for what I do, but I feel like I've paid my dues. I've earned it after decades of doing this, that this method that I teach now at my clinics and my seminars, which are far more comprehensive and in-depth, this method works. So now I bring players out to my clinics. I spend an hour, just like the traditional clinics, teaching backhand, sidearm, and putting, the fundamentals of the game. But now at my clinics, what I do is after that, I spend several hours working with players. I do one-on-one form reviews where everything we just talked about, now you throw, now we apply it. Because I simplify things as much as possible. That's the key to how I teach, is simplification. When someone goes out to throw, we've already covered all the details. Now I just reference back to what we covered in the clinic. Remember that thing I told you about, how you want to keep your weight above your hips, and here's why? You're leaning over too much when you throw. Get your weight above your hips. All of a sudden the person steps up and they're like, what just happened? That worked? It's like, yeah, it's not easy. Super simple. It's the method I've developed that works. And now I'm traveling around the country doing my full day seminars, which is kind of my focus. But in between the seminars, as much as possible, I'm still doing the afternoon throwing clinics. I'll probably always do them because they're fun. And so that's the history of the throwing clinics. The fact that so many pros are now able to supplement their touring incomes, and in fact, so many pros are able to tour because of being able to do clinics, is something that just, it makes me so happy. The fact that I created this thing that my friends can now use to help live the dream that I've got to live is so rewarding. In fact, that is as rewarding as actually helping players play better. I love it all. So that is the short history of my teaching and the short history of the Disc Golf Throwing Clinic.